Picture this, a crowded ballroom shimmering with golden lights, journalists snapping photos, and the city's wealthiest gathered to toast their successes. Suddenly the laughter and clinking glasses freeze. A man known to everyone as the millionaire with a fairy tale marriage kneels on the marble floor, holding out a glittering engagement ring. Not to his wife, but to the mystery woman in a figure-hugging red dress at his side. Gasps ripple through the spectators. Cameras flash like lightning. The wife stands just a few feet away, silent and statuesque, her eyes revealing nothing. You can practically taste the scandal in the air. Prepare for heartbreak betrayal and a silence that speaks volumes. Ethan Caldwell was a self-made man. He had clawed his way from humble origins in a small Pennsylvania town to the top of the real estate market in Manhattan. As a teenager, he flipped cars in his neighbor's driveway to earn pocket money. But it was when he discovered a knack for property deals that his life changed forever. Tenacity became his hallmark, and soon he was buying run-down apartments, renovating them, and selling them for triple the price. By 25, he'd made his first $1 million. By 30, the world was in his palm. His wife, Rebecca Caldwell née Harrington, was the daughter of a prominent judge, James Harrington, known throughout the Northeastern Circuit for his integrity. Ethan's in-laws had been wary of the brash, ambitious young man courting their daughter. But Rebecca herself was mesmerized by his drive, his burning desire to conquer every obstacle in his path. She was a gentle soul, a classical pianist with refined tastes. He was the unstoppable entrepreneur who felt equally at home in a boardroom or a seedy construction site. Opposites, but they attracted like magnets, forging a romance that took high society by storm. Their wedding was legendary, held at the Harrington estate, with white doves released at sunrise and a fireworks display at sunset. The press swooned over the perfect couple, writing rhapsodic features about their unstoppable synergy, the brilliant, polished artist and her cunning, resourceful husband. In interviews, Ethan credited his success to his wife's unwavering support. She smiled shyly from behind him, her eyes filled with an abiding love that made it easy for the public to believe they were soulmates. Over time, Ethan's empire ballooned. He founded Caldwell International Group, branching beyond real estate into shipping logistics and even tech startups. Luxury offices in Midtown Manhattan became his command center, frequented by investors, board members, and the occasional celebrity friend. Every year, the tabloids chronicled the couple's exotic vacations, yachting off Santorini, skiing in the Swiss Alps. It was an image of glossy perfection. Ethan as the dashing millionaire, Rebecca as his poised, intelligent partner who hosted fundraisers for local charities and endowed music scholarships under her family's name. Behind the scenes, however, cracks were beginning to show. The demands of an ever-growing empire left Ethan pulling all-nighters. Rebecca, accustomed to a quieter life of piano recitals and intimate gatherings, struggled to keep pace. Their moments alone dwindled, replaced by frantic phone calls, urgent business dinners, and expansions that never stopped. She would pass him in the hallway of their penthouse with a gentle smile, but there was always a line etched into his brow, a permanent frown, blossoming whenever he glanced at his phone. Yet the public saw only the shining exterior, the poised wife of a titan. Nothing, not even the occasional rumor of Ethan's affairs, could tarnish this portrait. After all, no one had proof, and Rebecca, if she suspected anything, showed no sign. The stage was set for a life that looked perfect from every angle until the day it all came crashing down. It began innocently enough, an introduction at a charity function. Ethan was the special guest speaker at a fundraising gala for the Children's Arts Initiative, a cause Rebecca held dear. Inside the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, He circulated among a sea of benefactors, sipping champagne while discussing the newest philanthropic projects. That was when he first spotted Lauren Smith, a stylish marketing consultant who'd recently joined Caldwell International as a brand strategist. Lauren had bright, intelligent eyes and a certain confidence that radiated from her. She was neither shy nor aggressive. She engaged him in light conversation about the night's program, skillfully complementing his philanthropic efforts without seeming disingenuous. His attention was piqued. After the formal speeches, the two found themselves at the same table. Rebecca, unwell that evening, had quietly slipped home early, leaving Ethan alone to mingle. As the night wore on, Ethan found Lauren's charm addictive. She seemed to understand his business challenges, offering clever insights that resonated with him in ways he rarely experienced outside his own circle of seasoned executives. By the time the event ended, he had given her his personal number under the guise of further discussing brand strategy ideas. The next day, her name floated through his mind. He told himself it was purely professional, a potential synergy. And yet he dialed her number that afternoon, setting up a lunch meeting in an upscale bistro in Midtown. Over seared salmon and delicate pastries, the conversation flowed like fine wine. This time, it wasn't just business. They laughed about small-town upbringings, about shared frustrations in corporate life. There was no immediate physical contact, but an intangible tension crackled between them. Days turned into weeks. A second lunch happened, then a third, an after-work drink. Perhaps it was the thrill of attraction or the rush of secrecy, but each meeting left them wanting more. He was drawn to her ambition, to her youthful optimism, and to the sense of liberation he felt when talking to her. No complex baggage, no endless responsibilities, just the promise of something exciting. Meanwhile, Rebecca remained in the background, consumed by rehearsals for an upcoming piano concerto. She spent hours practicing in their soundproof music room, preparing for a solo performance at Carnegie Hall. In the evenings, Ethan would claim late-night business meetings or urgent calls with investors, while Lauren discreetly joined him at exclusive lounges far from the paparazzi's lens. A pattern had formed, as dangerous affairs often do. One stormy evening, when thunder rolled over Manhattan's skyscrapers, Ethan found himself alone with Lauren in the back of a limo, returning from a business conference in Boston. The windows were dark, the city lights a blur as the driver navigated through flooded streets. Lauren's hand touched his. Their eyes locked. In a sudden, undeniable moment, he leaned in, and they kissed a betrayal as electric as the lightning cracking the sky. Within that single instant, the fate of his marriage was irreversibly altered, though he still clung to the notion that he could keep both women in his life. But events were about to spiral far beyond his control. Rebecca was not naive. She noticed the subtle changes in her husband's schedule, the hushed phone calls at odd hours, the faint trace of perfume on his collar that wasn't hers, and the stammer in his voice when he tried to explain missing dinners. A quiet dread began to settle in her mind, though she didn't voice her suspicions. Instead, she observed him from a distance, trying to gather silent proof that her once perfect marriage was drifting dangerously off course. One evening they attended a benefit concert at Lincoln Center. Rebecca was performing a short piece before a star violinist took the stage. Ethan arrived late, slipping into a front-row seat next to an empty chair meant for him. Rebecca could see him scanning the auditorium, as if searching for someone else. His phone clenched in his hand. There was a moment, barely 2 seconds, where she caught the flicker in his eyes when a woman in a sleek emerald-green gown entered the balcony. She recognized that woman, Lauren Smith. Lauren's presence at high-profile events was normally explained by her role in public relations for Caldwell International. But seeing Ethan's reaction was like a knife twisting in Rebecca's gut. Despite her pounding heart, she performed her piece flawlessly, each note resonating with pent-up emotion she couldn't yet voice in words. After the final applause, as the audience erupted in a standing ovation, Rebecca bowed graciously, locking eyes with Ethan. He clapped enthusiastically, but she detected guilt in the set of his jaw. That night, she confronted him delicately. "You seemed distracted during the concert," she remarked while changing out of her performance gown. "Is everything all right at work?" Ethan waved it away. "One of our brand specialists came. I was making sure she had the right seats and was greeted properly." He said it casually, but Rebecca noticed the tension in his shoulders. She wanted to ask more, but some quiet voice told her not to press. Not yet. Behind the scenes, the seeds of suspicion grew stronger each time Ethan left the penthouse for a meeting past midnight, or when he disappeared for entire weekends under the excuse of out-of-town site inspections. Rebecca began confiding in her closest friend, Cynthia Perez, an art dealer who had known her since college. Cynthia, quick-witted and protective, advised her to gather evidence before jumping to conclusions. "Don't let your heart lead you," Cynthia cautioned gently. "If he's crossing a line, you need to be sure before you confront him." Determined to maintain her dignity, Rebecca hired a private investigator named Mark Logan, a quiet, grey-haired man with a reputation for discretion. Through hushed phone calls in the middle of the day, she arranged for Mark to trail Ethan, to take photos to note every rendezvous. It tore at her heart to resort to such measures, but her gut told her it was the only way to uncover the truth. Every night, she went to sleep next to Ethan, her heart pounding, pretending nothing was wrong. Yet every morning she checked her phone, waiting for the investigator's updates, bracing herself for the moment her deepest fears would be confirmed. Over the course of several weeks, Mark Logan meticulously charted Ethan's movements. He documented the clandestine lunches at upscale restaurants, secret visits to luxury hotel bars, and late-night drives across the city where Lauren accompanied Ethan in the back seat of a company car. The evidence was damning photos of the two holding hands, stolen kisses on a street corner. Lauren's figure slipping into Ethan's penthouse when Rebecca was out of town for a performance. When Mark presented the findings, Rebecca's heart sank. The color drained from her face, and her usually steady pianist's hands trembled. Each photograph was a bullet of truth hitting her chest. In one particularly incriminating image, Ethan and Lauren stood in front of the Caldwell International building, an intimate moment frozen in time. He touched her cheek gently, a gesture Rebecca had once believed was reserved only for her. Despite the heartbreak, she forced herself to examine every piece of evidence carefully to steel herself for what was to come. She asked Mark to keep his investigation silent for now, not to confront Ethan or leak information to the media. She needed time to think, time to decide her next move. Mark, ever the professional, agreed with a solemn nod. During this emotional storm, she confided in only two people: Cynthia Perez and her younger sister, Erin Harrington, who flew in from Boston the moment she sensed trouble. Erin was fiery, a stark contrast to Rebecca's composed demeanor. "This is outrageous," Erin shouted, pacing the penthouse living room. "You can't let him get away with this. You need to leave him or confront him or something." Rebecca remained silent, gazing out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in her chest: anger, sadness, betrayal, and strangely enough, a lingering love for the man who had once been her world. "It's not that simple," she murmured, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're worth more than this." Cynthia added softly, placing a supportive hand on Rebecca's shoulder. Whatever you decide, we'll stand by you. Just know you have options. In the days that followed, Rebecca hovered in a state of suspended animation. She went through her daily routines: piano practice, philanthropic commitments, public appearances at charity galas, wearing her mask of composure as though nothing had changed. Yet inside she was crumbling, each beat of her heart weighed down by the knowledge of Ethan's betrayal. Across town, Ethan and Lauren continued their affair, oblivious to how close they were to being exposed. They had grown bolder, longer weekends out of the city public dinners at exclusive restaurants, secret smiles in the hallways at Caldwell International. They believed they were shielded by their discretion. They underestimated the quiet vigilance of a wife who now knew more than she let on. In a cruel twist of irony, the tabloids still hailed Ethan and Rebecca as a power couple, praising their philanthropic work and glamorizing their seemingly perfect marriage. The city's wealthiest had no idea of the storm that was about to erupt, one that would change the lives of Ethan Lauren and Rebecca forever. One crisp autumn evening, Rebecca decided to attend a Caldwell International corporate function unannounced. She had been invited, of course. It was a gala, celebrating the launch of a new luxury condominium project near Central Park, but typically, she let Ethan handle these business affairs on his own. This time, she wanted to see the dynamics firsthand, to observe Ethan and Lauren in the same room. Dressed in a sapphire gown that accentuated her graceful figure, Rebecca entered the opulent ballroom. The decor was magnificent crystal chandeliers, towering flower arrangements, and waiters carrying trays of champagne. Although she was well known among the attendees, few expected to see her here tonight. Curious glances trailed her as she made her way to the center of the room. Ethan was speaking with a cluster of investors when he saw her. A flash of panic appeared in his eyes, quickly replaced by a broad, practiced smile. He excused himself and wove through the crowd to greet her with a polite kiss on the cheek. "You look stunning," he said, his tone carefully measured. "Thank you," she replied softly. She noticed how he didn't quite meet her gaze. She noticed, too, that Lauren was across the room, speaking with a group of board members. Their eyes flickered toward each other, an invisible connection that Rebecca could almost feel pulsing through the crowd. Throughout the evening, Rebecca maintained a regal composure. She chatted cordially with colleagues, accepted compliments with a graceful nod, and kept her distance from Lauren. Yet each time she passed near Ethan, she sensed his tension. He was careful not to let his gaze linger too long on Lauren, but the underlying current was unmistakable. There was more between them than business. Near the end of the event, she spotted a moment when Ethan and Lauren slipped out onto a balcony, presumably to discuss something privately. Rebecca waited a full 10 minutes before she too stepped outside. Arms crossed against the chilly air. The sight that greeted her was a dagger to the heart. Ethan had his hand on Lauren's waist, leaning in close. Though they weren't kissing, their intimacy was undeniable. Their heads snapped around as she cleared her throat. Lauren quickly stepped away, a flush staining her cheeks. Ethan tried to recover, adjusting his collar nervously. "Rebecca," he said. Forcing a bright tone, "Lauren was just showing me some new marketing concepts for the condominiums. We needed a quieter spot to talk." Rebecca's eyes flicked from Ethan to Lauren. She felt an urge to erupt, to hurl accusations at them, but she remembered the promise she'd made to herself to remain composed, to choose her moment carefully. So she simply offered a thin smile. "Of course," she replied. "Don't let me interrupt." Then she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving them both in stunned silence. Behind her, the city lights of Manhattan glowed with a deceptive warmth. Inside, her world was fracturing, the tension steadily rising toward the breaking point. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Rebecca felt a new emotion stirring beneath the pain, an icy resolve to face what she now knew without question. Rumors of Ethan's closeness to a mysterious woman had started circulating among Manhattan's elite. Whispers at social clubs, sly remarks among corporate circles, though no one dared confront him publicly. After all, Ethan Caldwell was a man of influence, and the benefits of staying on his good side far outweighed the risk of provoking him. Yet the gossip grew, and somehow Lauren reveled in the illicit attention. Perhaps it was the thrill of stepping out of the shadows, or maybe she was blinded by the promise of being part of Ethan's glamorous world. Eventually, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. Tired of secrecy, emboldened by his love for Lauren, call it foolishness or arrogance, he decided to propose in the most public, extravagant manner possible. He was convinced that once he announced his intentions, the narrative would shift in his favor. In his mind, wealth and power could rewrite any scandal. He believed that if he went big, the public might applaud his boldness rather than condemn his betrayal. It was a crisp winter evening at the Metropolitan Club, a venue notorious for hosting some of the city's most prestigious galas. The event was a charity auction for children's education, a cause Ethan had supported for years. Rebecca attended as part of her philanthropic commitments, though her mind was miles away, still wrestling with the heartbreak at home. Just as the auctioneer concluded the final bid, Ethan stepped forward. Clutching the microphone, he cleared his throat. His heart hammered, but adrenaline spurred him on. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice echoing across the gilded hall, "I want to thank you all for your generosity tonight. This cause, children's education, is incredibly dear to me." Applause filled the space. Rebecca, standing near the back, watched him with narrowed eyes, unsure what was happening. Then, to her horror, Ethan beckoned Lauren to join him on stage. In a fitted red gown, she glided up the steps, her face glowing with anticipation. The crowd murmured in confusion. No one had introduced her. Ethan took Lauren's hand. "I've been blessed in many ways," he began, "but none so profoundly as finding someone who truly understands me, who shares my passions and my dreams. Tonight I want to share that blessing with all of you because I intend to ask this incredible woman to be my wife." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Rebecca's blood turned to ice, her breath caught in her throat. She was too far away to move, too stunned to do anything but stare in disbelief. She felt pinned in place, the entire room spinning around her. On stage, Ethan dropped to one knee, extending a velvet box. Inside was a ring so large it dazzled under the chandeliers, a dramatic symbol of his wealth and his disregard for the vows he'd already exchanged. Lauren's hands flew to her mouth in mock surprise, her eyes brimming with tears of triumph. "Yes," she whispered into the microphone voice, trembling. "Yes, of course, I'll marry you." The applause that followed was hesitant, confused. People exchanged uncertain glances. Half the room was too stunned to react, the other half too polite not to clap. At the back, Rebecca felt her heart shatter into a million pieces, yet she uttered not a single word. She turned and walked out of the venue, leaving behind a storm of flashes, gasps, and murmurs. And in the silence of her exit, she made the single most pivotal choice of her life, to remain completely, resolutely silent. The morning after the proposal, Manhattan was abuzz with scandal. Social media exploded with clips of Ethan on one knee, ring in hand, proposing to a woman who was not his wife. Paparazzi camped outside the Caldwell penthouse, eager to snap photos of Rebecca's reaction. But Rebecca never emerged. She stayed within the sanctuary of the upper floors, curtains drawn, phone switched off. She would not answer the door nor give a statement. The city had never witnessed such a shocking turn of events, and the wife's silence became the story's most compelling mystery. Inside the penthouse, Rebecca walked through marble-tiled corridors as though in a dream. She half expected Ethan to burst in and demand an explanation for her leaving the gala. But he did not. He was too busy with damage control spinning half-truths in business meetings, and to the media claiming his marriage to Rebecca had been over for some time, that the proposal was merely a formality of a new chapter. More interviews were requested, more tabloids thirsted for juicy details. Yet from Rebecca, there was nothing. No comment, no tearful confession, no rage-filled condemnation. Complete silence. Friends, family, and even reporters bombarded her with messages. Cynthia and Erin were frantic, urging her to speak out, to defend her reputation and condemn Ethan publicly. But she waved them off, face set in a calm mask. "Not yet," she said softly. "When the time is right, you'll know." Meanwhile, Ethan was unraveling. He had not anticipated that Rebecca, known for her grace and composure, would respond to his public betrayal by withdrawing entirely. He had expected outrage lawyers' letters or a weeping meltdown. Instead, he got nothing, and that nothingness became an echo in his mind, growing louder every day. He'd reach out to her phone, no answer. He'd ring the penthouse door from the lobby. She'd refuse him entry. He left her dozens of voicemails, each one more pleading than the last. "Rebecca, just speak to me," he said, voice cracking with frustration. "We can figure this out like adults." But she remained silent, as a ghost, her refusal to engage gnawing at him more than any public fight could have. Lauren attempted to soothe him, encouraging him to ignore Rebecca. "We're together now," she said, flaunting her engagement ring. "This will all blow over if we stand firm." Yet Ethan found himself unable to shake the unease in his gut. Something about Rebecca's silence felt more dangerous than any scandal. One afternoon, a tabloid posted a headline in bold letters: "Millionaire's wife, missing or plotting her revenge." Ethan read the article, his palms sweating. Reporters speculated that Rebecca might be preparing a massive lawsuit, or that she had left the country, or even that she had had a breakdown. Every theory made Ethan more anxious. He realized that despite his wealth and power, he had no control over the one person who mattered most in this entire fiasco, and so the city's greatest question remained unanswered. What would Rebecca do next? In the quiet corners of her penthouse, she sat at her piano, fingers poised above the keys, refusing to let a single note escape. She could only hear her own heartbeat, steady and resolute, as she bided her time. While the city speculated about Rebecca's motives, Ethan found himself drowning in complications. Investors grew skittish, concerned that personal scandals could erode confidence in Caldwell International. Major partners reached out with polite but urgent phone calls, seeking reassurance that the man at the helm had not lost his grip. Share prices dipped slightly, reflecting the market's discomfort with the swirling rumors. Lauren tried to help, taking up the role of a de facto spokeswoman. She gave interviews to smaller media outlets, painting a narrative that she and Ethan had been in love for some time, that Rebecca and Ethan were separated in all but name. But the interviews only fueled public speculation. Some social media commentators labeled her a gold digger, mocking Ethan for his brazen public proposal. Others empathized with her, seeing love as unstoppable. The divide was stark, and Ethan found himself on the defensive. At Caldwell International's headquarters, tensions reached a boiling point. Jordan Reynolds, the CFO, confronted Ethan about the negativity swirling around the firm. "I don't care what you do in your personal life," he growled, "but this fiasco is affecting business. We need stability, not front-page scandals." Ethan tried to dismiss the concerns, insisting that the worst would blow over. But doubt began to gnaw at him. He missed the days when Rebecca's calm presence reassured the public and added credibility to his brand. Behind the scenes, new revelations came to light. Cynthia Perez, fueled by loyalty to Rebecca, dug into Lauren's background and unearthed questionable financial dealings. A small publishing house in Chicago sued Lauren 2 years ago for breach of contract, claiming she'd broken NDAs and misappropriated funds. While the lawsuit had been settled out of court, the details were damning. Rumor had it that Lauren had used her romantic ties with the CEO of that company to secure insider advantages, then left him high and dry. When Cynthia quietly shared these findings with Rebecca, she saw a flicker in her friend's eyes. This was not the first time Lauren had entangled herself with a powerful man's empire. A pattern emerged. She latched onto ambitious men, wormed her way into their personal and professional spheres, and exited with substantial gains, leaving chaos in her wake. Rebecca said nothing, but Cynthia sensed a shift. It was as if the final puzzle piece had clicked into place. Rebecca now held not only emotional leverage, her silence, but also potential legal ammunition. And still she waited. Meanwhile, Ethan struggled to reconcile the woman he claimed to love with the uneasy revelations. When confronted about her past, Lauren dismissed it as a smear campaign. "I'm not that person anymore," she insisted, tears glistening. "I only want what's best for us. Don't let them twist old mistakes into something worse." Ethan believed her, or forced himself to. He was in too deep, forging ahead with wedding plans, sending out feelers for exclusive venues in the Hamptons, or even a private island ceremony. But each day, the mounting pressure from investors and the deafening silence from Rebecca eroded his confidence. Winter deepened, casting a chill across the city. Snow piled on sidewalks, reflecting the cold tension in Ethan's heart. He was a man trapped between conflicting loyalties, consumed by desires he couldn't fully understand. And through it all, Rebecca held her composure, waiting for the right moment to strike. Rebecca's father, Judge James Harrington, had refrained from public commentary since news of the scandal broke. A widely respected figure, he was known for his unyielding moral code and had always been a guiding force in Rebecca's life. In the weeks following Ethan's public proposal to Lauren, James requested a private meeting with his daughter. In a small study at the Harrington estate, father and daughter sat across from each other. The room smelled of old books and polished wood, the walls lined with law tomes and framed photographs of James's judicial milestones. Rebecca's face was pale, a sheen of heartbreak still lingering in her eyes. Her father poured her a cup of tea, silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. Finally he spoke. "My child, the world has been cruel to you lately. I want to help in any way I can." Rebecca lowered her gaze. "I know, Dad, but I need to handle this in my own way." James studied her for a long moment. He understood that while he could offer legal and moral support, Rebecca's dignity and autonomy were paramount. He slid a folder across the mahogany desk. Inside were legal documents. Evidence of Ethan's breach of fiduciary duty if he'd used company funds for personal affairs, and potential spousal claims if Rebecca chose to divorce. "You have every resource I can provide," he said gently. "But I won't force your hand. You do what feels right, and I'll stand beside you." With tears in her eyes, she reached over and squeezed his hand. For the first time in weeks, she felt fortified, as if her silent strategy had a powerful ally beside her. Meanwhile, on Ethan's side, tensions escalated. Lauren had her eyes set on one goal, a high-profile wedding that would cement her position by Ethan's side. She orchestrated lavish photo shoots, arranged exclusive interviews about her fairy tale romance, and insisted on finalizing a prenuptial agreement that curiously favored her more than any sensible advisor would recommend. Jordan Reynolds Caldwell International's CFO warned Ethan against signing anything in haste. Ethan, though, still entangled by his desire, hesitated, unsure if he could trust Lauren's motives fully. Ethan was not completely without allies, however. A powerful corporate attorney named Dr. Howard Kinsey had joined his side, promising to neutralize any threat Rebecca might pose if she decided to come after the Caldwell fortune. They drew up strategies to claim Rebecca was aware of the separation long before the proposal, painting her silence as tacit acceptance. Ethan hated the idea of attacking Rebecca's reputation, but his fear of losing everything pushed him to extremes. He rationalized that if she filed for divorce, he'd need every legal advantage to protect his empire. The lines were being drawn. Allies on both sides gathered quietly, preparing for an inevitable clash. Rebecca's father, her close friends, and the evidence they'd amassed against Ethan and Lauren. Ethan's corporate attorney, his hungry PR teams, and the shield of money and influence he believed could protect him. The city braced for a showdown that no one could quite predict, and in the middle of it all was Rebecca, still silent, still watching, biding her time, as the swirling maelstrom of allies and enemies drew ever tighter around her. The final straw came on a snowy evening in February. Ethan, out of desperation, decided to confront Rebecca face to face at their penthouse. He had tried phone calls, text messages, emails. All went unanswered. He was convinced that if he could just talk to her, if she could see his point of view, perhaps they could part ways amicably, or at least come to some financial settlement without further scandal. Armed with a bouquet of white orchids, Rebecca's favorite, he went to the penthouse, brushing past the doorman, who hesitated, but ultimately let him pass. The elevator ride felt endless, each ding raising his anxiety. When the doors slid open, he entered the silent marble foyer. He called out her name. No response. Venturing deeper, he found her in the music room, seated at the piano. She stared at the keys, but made no sound. He placed the orchids gently on the polished wood surface and cleared his throat. "Rebecca," he began, his voice quivering with emotion. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for it to happen this way." She turned slightly, her expression unreadable. But she didn't speak. She simply watched him, her eyes steady, offering no hint of anger or forgiveness. "I know I hurt you," he continued, stepping closer. "I was selfish and stupid. Lauren, He paused, struggling for words. "I thought I could find something new, something exciting. But I never wanted to destroy you." Still, Rebecca remained silent. Ethan's frustration flared. He had come expecting tears, accusations, or even a slap, anything but this impassive calm. "Speak to me," he demanded, voice shaking. "Please. Say something. I need to know what you want." Rebecca raised her gaze, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan saw a flicker of deep sorrow and fierce resolve in her eyes. Yet not a syllable passed her lips. Instead, she stood, walked to the door of the music room, and held it open, gesturing for him to leave. Her meaning was unmistakable. Devastated, Ethan stepped out into the hallway. His heart pounded as he realized the finality of her gesture. He had truly lost her, and he felt an inexplicable emptiness. Where once he had commanded entire boardrooms, now he found himself powerless in the face of her silence. By the time he reached the street, snow was falling heavily, blanketing the sidewalk in white. Lauren called frantic about some rumored lawsuit that might be coming from Rebecca's side. "I'm busy," Ethan barked into the phone, cutting her off. His thoughts swirled. He realized that what he missed the most wasn't just the comfort of Rebecca's presence. It was the respect she commanded, the moral grounding she provided, and the stability that had allowed him to thrive. Without her, everything felt like it was teetering on the brink of collapse. And in the hush of that snowy night, he understood that her silence was a sentence more damning than any shouted accusation. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on everything they'd built together. And he knew in his heart that he had no one to blame but himself. After the confrontation at the penthouse, after Rebecca had silently walked to the door and motioned Ethan out, everything began to come apart. Ethan told himself he'd be fine, that he still had the upper hand, that public memory was short and fortunes could be rebuilt. But deep down he knew something had shifted. Rebecca hadn't needed to scream or weep or call him names. She'd simply stood there silent and composed, and it had broken him in a way no public scandal ever could. And then the first wave hit. Within days, rumors became headlines. Judge James Harrington, Rebecca's father, quietly filed preliminary divorce paperwork in family court. The documents were swiftly leaked to the press. By the end of the week, every news outlet was dissecting the filings. Headlines screamed betrayal, adultery, and financial misconduct. The glossy narrative Ethan had spent years cultivating crumbled in full view of the world. Crisis meetings were held in back offices at Caldwell International. The boardroom, once a shrine to Ethan's dominance, now felt like a courtroom. Jordan Reynolds, the CFO, called for an emergency session. He didn't mince words. "We're hemorrhaging credibility. Investors are nervous. There's talk of pulling out of our South Korea expansion. And frankly, they don't trust you right now, Ethan." "I've made a mistake," Ethan admitted, loosening his tie. "But this doesn't define the company." Jordan didn't even blink. It might not define it, but it's dragging it down fast. Meanwhile, Lauren tried to spin a narrative of romance over scandal. She gave interviews to friendly lifestyle outlets, posing for photos with Ethan smiling as she described their unexpected but beautiful love. But the public wasn't buying it. Her engagement ring, a gleaming symbol of Ethan's betrayal, became a lightning rod for online mockery. Social media turned savage. When a respected journalist published a piece titled "The Mistress with a Motive," citing anonymous sources, shady financial ties, and whispered allegations from Lauren's previous jobs, everything changed. Investors began pulling back. Event sponsors cut ties. Even Ethan's high society allies stopped returning calls. Back in the Harrington family's circle, the counteroffensive was being quietly orchestrated. Cynthia Perez had handed over the evidence from the private investigator to Rebecca's legal team. Erin, Rebecca's sister, contacted a friend at a major newspaper, feeding them just enough to raise questions without exposing everything at once. And Rebecca, she still hadn't said a word publicly. She moved through her days like a shadow queen. She resumed teaching masterclasses at the conservatory, smiling gently to students, her fingers fluid on the keys. She hosted a donor luncheon for the Children's Arts Initiative, calmly answering questions about the future of the foundation, never once mentioning the scandal playing out in real time. When asked by a particularly bold reporter if she had a response to her husband's public proposal, Rebecca offered the smallest smile. "No comment," she said softly, then turned away. It drove Ethan mad. He had prepared for anger, for screaming, even for legal threats. But not this cold, surgical refusal to engage. Her silence was louder than his press conferences, more powerful than any of Lauren's Instagram apologies. It wasn't long before things inside Caldwell International began to fracture further. Whispers spread that the board was preparing for an internal vote, that if Ethan couldn't control the narrative, he would be temporarily removed as CEO. And then came the article. The investigative expose dropped like a bomb, a deep dive into Lauren's history, her fast climb through corporate ranks, her lawsuits and her tendency to attach herself to powerful men. One paragraph stood out. Sources allege that Ms. Smith used her influence to manipulate internal decisions at Caldwell International, securing lucrative contracts tied to companies linked to her personal accounts. Ethan's phone exploded. Calls from lawyers, from investors, from his PR team, from Lauren crying, screaming, asking what they were going to do. He had no answer. Lauren begged him to make a public statement denying the claims. "We need to show unity," she insisted, "that I'm not some opportunist." But Ethan couldn't even look her in the eyes. Days later, the board called the vote. Jordan Reynolds emerged as interim CEO. Ethan was asked politely but firmly to take a leave of absence until the storm passed. He signed the papers in a haze. Lauren tried to rally him, suggesting they hold a private engagement party or book an exclusive retreat in Tuscany. "This will blow over," she kept repeating. "You're still Ethan Caldwell." But for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't feel like Ethan Caldwell. He felt like a hollow version of the man he'd once been. He missed the stability he'd taken for granted. The calming voice that used to talk him off ledges. The woman who had shown him grace, not just in public, but in the quiet of their home. Rebecca. And the worst part. He had no way back to her. Her legal team was moving swiftly now. Motions were filed, court dates assigned. And through it all, she had spoken no more than a few carefully chosen words. Every time a reporter caught her on the street, she walked past with dignified silence. Until finally, she gave one quote, outside the courtroom, with cameras flashing and microphones thrust into her face. Rebecca stopped just long enough to say, "I only seek what is fair. The rest will take care of itself." It was all she needed to say. The public leaned harder in her favor. Op-eds praised her restraint. Women across the city lauded her dignity. Even Ethan's own mother, who hadn't spoken to Rebecca in months, reached out to her privately and apologized for what her son had done. Back in the penthouse, the one he now occupied alone. Ethan sat by the window and watched the snow fall. He thought of the piano room of Rebecca sitting there with her hands hovering over the keys, refusing to play a single note until she was ready. She had waited. She had endured. And now, as he watched his reputation unravel stitch by stitch, Ethan finally understood. She hadn't just waited for revenge. She'd waited for the moment when silence would become her justice, and it had arrived. The wind was sharp that Monday morning, slicing between the stone columns of the family courthouse in downtown Manhattan. Reporters huddled with steaming coffee cups, their breath visible in the chill. Camera crews jockeyed for position near the steps. It wasn't every day a courtroom drama involved New York's elite, and certainly not one this sensational. All eyes turned when Ethan Caldwell arrived. Clad in a tailored navy suit, he exited a black SUV with his high-powered attorney, Dr. Howard Kinsey, at his side. His face, usually composed, betrayed hints of tension. Despite weeks of media training, there was no way to fully prepare for this moment, being sued by the wife he'd so publicly betrayed. Flashbulbs exploded. "Mr. Caldwell." "Any comment on today's hearing?" someone shouted. Ethan said nothing. Inside the building on the opposite side of the security checkpoint, Rebecca Harrington, no longer Caldwell, walked quietly down the hall. She wore a long black wool coat over a simple yet elegant dress, her dark hair pulled into a low chignon. Flanked by her father, Judge James Harrington, and her attorney, she moved like a queen, stepping onto her battlefield, not with fanfare, but with quiet command. She didn't look for Ethan. She didn't need to. Her silence, even here, was her strongest weapon. The courtroom buzzed as Judge Olivia Bertrand took her seat, a no-nonsense, sharp-eyed woman known across the state for her impartiality and disdain for theatrics. The gavel fell. "Let's proceed." Ethan's legal team moved quickly, attempting to frame the separation as long-standing and amicable. Dr. Kinsey, with smooth precision, painted the narrative of a marriage already dissolved before Ethan's engagement to Lauren Smith. "Our client," Kinsey said, "wishes only to close this chapter with dignity and fairness." There was no malicious intent. But the opposing table had come prepared. Rebecca's lawyer, a shrewd woman named Naomi Feld, stood and began laying out a meticulous timeline. Photographs, timestamps, sworn statements, detailed surveillance logs from the private investigator. All of it pointed to one thing: the affair had begun well before any formal separation. And more importantly, Ethan had made a public spectacle out of it. The bombshells didn't stop there. They introduced financial documents showing questionable transfers from Caldwell International accounts to cover private trips with Lauren, receipts from luxury hotels, flights billed under consulting expenses. It wasn't just personal betrayal, it was potential misuse of corporate funds, and the court took notice. Throughout it all, Rebecca sat straight-backed, hands folded gently in her lap. She did not interrupt. She didn't need to. The facts did the talking. When it came time for her to testify, the courtroom hushed. She rose and walked to the stand. Her voice was calm, neither trembling nor sharp, as she answered the judge's questions. She detailed how she discovered the affair, how Ethan's public proposal blindsided her, how she endured weeks of media scrutiny in silence, not out of weakness, but to preserve what little dignity remained. "I chose not to speak until now," she said evenly, "because I knew the truth would speak for itself." Her words were measured, her tone never vengeful. Yet they struck harder than any accusation. Even Judge Bertrand paused before continuing, visibly moved by Rebecca's restraint and clarity. At one point, Bertrand asked if she sought spousal support or extended litigation over the Caldwell estate. The courtroom held its breath. Rebecca looked directly at the judge and answered no. "I only ask for what is fair. I don't need to destroy what's left. I only want to walk away, knowing I didn't become what hurt me." Ethan flinched. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. "Rebecca speaks, calm, collected and unbreakable," read one headline. "Caldwell's empire at risk as divorce turns tactical," read another. Talk shows buzzed, speculating on whether Rebecca's composed testimony had just cost Ethan his last shred of public goodwill. The final settlement didn't make her a billionaire, but it didn't have to. Rebecca secured a generous portion of their joint assets, ownership of their vacation property in Cape Cod, and a one-time corporate payout. But what mattered most was what she declined: excessive alimony, a fight for majority control, or any intention to drag Ethan through years of litigation. Her message was clear: "I don't need to ruin you. You've already done that yourself." Back at the Caldwell penthouse, Ethan stood in his now empty living room, watching the media coverage play out on muted screens. Lauren was pacing nearby, her phone buzzing with messages from panicked acquaintances and corporate contacts distancing themselves. "They're saying I'll be subpoenaed," she snapped. "Do something, Ethan." But he barely heard her. His thoughts were thousands of miles away, stuck on the sight of Rebecca on the courtroom bench. Her silence no longer mysterious, but monumental. "I gave you everything," Lauren hissed, but Ethan didn't answer. His empire had become a house of cards, and now the winds were howling. Over the following weeks, Caldwell International's board quietly voted to replace him as CEO. Jordan Reynolds stepped in to stabilize the company, issuing statements that the firm would refocus on integrity and investor trust. The damage had been done, but the rebuild had begun without Ethan at the helm. Rebecca, meanwhile, stepped into her new life with a kind of grace that the city admired and envied. She moved out of the penthouse and into a historic brownstone on the Upper West Side. She reinstated her family name, Harrington, and poured herself into the Children's Arts Initiative, even endowing a scholarship fund for young women in the arts. She never gave another interview. Lauren eventually disappeared from the social scene, her glittering moment of fame gone as quickly as it had come. Without Ethan's name to protect her, and with mounting legal scrutiny, she quietly relocated to Chicago. The engagement was called off. Ethan never truly recovered, not financially, but emotionally. His fortune remained diminished, yet vast. But every room felt emptier. Every night was quiet. He would scroll through news clips of Rebecca's court statements, rewatch her walking past the press with her head held high. The silence she wielded, the poise she maintained, echoed louder than any public outcry ever could. He had proposed to his mistress in front of the world, expecting applause. But it was his wife's silence that history would remember. And in that silence, Rebecca Harrington had found something even rarer than revenge peace. Thank you for following this story of scandal, heartbreak, and a woman's unbreakable resolve. If you found yourself caught in the suspense of Ethan Caldwell's downfall and Rebecca's quiet, triumphant stand, be sure to let us know. Share your thoughts on the public proposal, the mistress and the wife whose silence spoke louder than any public outcry ever could. If you enjoyed this drama-filled journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Stories of love, betrayal, and the resilience of the human spirit. Your support keeps us going, fueling our dedication to bring you more captivating tales. So hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay connected. We appreciate every moment you spend with us, and we can't wait to share our next thrilling story with you. Until then, stay inspired and keep exploring.